Before smartphones were as common as they are now, and recording in perfect high quality didn't require just a few taps on a screen, having recording facilities was a luxury that not many people had. With it being such a part of our lives today, we forget sometimes that having the novelty of being able to make our home videos was quite scarce. This phase of home video and private filmmaking becoming more and more commonplace led to the movie studios getting involved and using this as a catalyst for the creation of some well-known films over the past 20 to 30 years. Probably to this day, the most iconic found footage film and one of the most memorable films from the 90s as a whole is The Blair Witch Project. Released in 1999, Blair Witch, alongside the famous ad campaign that accompanied the film, led to people genuinely debating on whether this film was a fictional story or a documentary that filmmakers had got their hands on. This film influenced, at least in the found footage nature, all of the films I'll be discussing today. Although Blair Witch was a 90s film, it really was the second half of the 2000s that the subgenre really started to get going. As much as Blair Witch influenced USA and Europe mainly, two films released in 2007 would be where found footage really got the resurgence it needed as a subgenre. The first film is Wreck, a wonderfully terrifying Spanish horror film that utilises brilliantly the simplistic nature of the best part of found footage, the fact that it feels so real. Set in a tower block that feels claustrophobic and grips the audience in a way that makes the cinema goers feel as if they're in this situation with the characters. Adding to this in 2007 began one of the most famous horror series to date, Paranormal Activity. Now, while the series as a whole has become a bit drawn out and overall is a bit of a mess, to be honest at this point, we mustn't forget how genius the first film is. Simplistic again in nature, with a normal couple experiencing what felt at the time genuinely scary moments in just their normal everyday lives. As you can probably tell, found footage lends itself best to horror films due to the realness factor that grips the audience. But many people have talked in length about found footage horror, so that's not what I'm here to discuss today. This video will be discussing more the non-horror films in the found footage subgenre, and three movies in particular that I feel are underrated and deserve a lot more love than they got, both at the time of their release and even now seem to be mostly forgotten about. But before I do get into talking about these three films in particular, it would be remiss of me to not acknowledge probably one of the best found footage films that wouldn't fall specifically into the horror category, although it does have its terrifying moments. This film is Cloverfield, a brilliant apocalyptic thriller slash sci-fi is how I would describe it, film released around the time of Wreck and Paranormal Activity, slightly after those two films were released. And maybe I'll talk about the Cloverfield series as a whole in another video, but for now let's discuss the first of these three films. Project Almanac. Released in 2015, and the newest release movie we'll be discussing during this video, Project Almanac all but spelled the end for studios making found footage films anymore. Or at least, certainly not to the degree in which they had been between the years of 2007 and 2015. Personally, I found Project Almanac to be a decent experience, but I feel that of the three films in discussion, this is the one least people would have been aware of. The two main themes explored in Project Almanac are high school romance and time travel, which in themselves are common movie tropes that appear in many forms. And while some of the plot points in this film certainly take inspiration from other films, the found footage element is the reason for me this film has quality. In a film that you would assume is generic in nature, I found a story that told a worthy tale of the fact that time travel is a lot more dangerous than we first think. Add to this some great moments of emotion and you have a solid found footage film. Chronicle. Released in 2012, amidst the beginning of the superhero craze that is still ongoing today, we had a different kind of film containing superhuman abilities. Chronicle documents three young men nearing the end of their school years, who stumble upon powers they could only dream of. Definitely the darkest of the three films, Chronicle is a hard-hitting tale showing not all people are destined to be superheroes. In a cast that also includes a very early in his career Michael B. Jordan, the standout in this film is definitely Dane DeHaan. While his career may be tarnished nowadays with a certain Green Goblin performance, his performance in Chronicle is definitely the strongest acting performance in all of these three films being discussed today. Watching this film nowadays gives a unique film experience including superpowers and shows how the superhero and found footage subgenres can blend if told correctly. I do feel if this film wasn't as dark in nature as it is, it wouldn't have the quality it does. And there certainly is some very dark and disturbing scenes throughout this film, mainly when the film enters its third act. Overall, Chronicle is an experience with a lot of emotion, tension, and real themes being explored. Well, as real as characters that are able to fly, that is. I've heard it described as the best film you've never seen, and while I wouldn't go that far in praising Chronicle, it certainly is the best pure film of the three in discussion today.
What up, my lovely females? This is your boy Costa, your host for the evening. Behind me is Thomas Cub's house. Today is Thomas Cub's birthday, and this is Project X. Yo.
Project X. Released in 2012, Project X documents three young men's latest quest to attain popularity, throwing a house party for their peers. What begins as a few people being invited becomes the most incredible and ludicrous party ever thrown in a film. Project X has one of the craziest hours of film you'll ever watch, basically the entire duration of the madness. While the other two films already discussed on this list have their own favourable qualities, for me personally, Project X is my favourite of the three, and is one of my favourite guilty pleasure movies, if you could even call it that. It's difficult to categorise this film into one subgenre, bar found footage of course. I'd say the best yet quite vague description would be found footage comedy film. And with our three main characters in Thomas, Costa and JB, there is a clear inspiration from the characters in Superbad, released in 2007. Michael Cera's Evan, which closely resembles Thomas's role in this film. Christopher Mintz-Plasse' McLovin has elements captured by the JB character in Project X, but the closest comparison of all, Costa, played by Oliver Cooper in Project X, has nearly the same mannerisms as Jonah Hill's Seth in Superbad, albeit Costa is more of a dialed up version of this character. And while as a film, Project X falls well short of the quality that Superbad has, these character tropes work great in Project X's dynamic, and lend to some great comedic moments. As much as Project X has a lot of the madness you'd expect, there is also an element of relatability with these characters, mainly based on the narrative that everyone at some point in their lives has envied being the popular kid in school. In this brings a willingness to root for these characters in Project X, aside from their absent lack of morals during periods of the film. Simply put, Project X for me is the most enjoyable house party film there is, and a large part of this is down to the fact of the found footage nature of the film. Seeing this through the eyes of a handheld camera allows the audience the experience of feeling like they're also in attendance at this party, and is the reason that Project X is my favourite non-horror found footage film to date. As much as I believe the two previously discussed films, Project Almanac and Chronicle, are thoroughly underrated, Project X is a film I have a real affinity to, and I love a lot for exactly what it is. A found footage, fun experience. Every film discussed in this video today, whether that be the horror films, Cloverfield, or any of the three main films this video is focused on, overall, none of these films are truly masterpieces by any means. But that doesn't necessarily mean the subgenre doesn't still have the potential of having another resurgence, and possibly, down the line, a truly top tier found footage horror film, or film in general, could be made. While I understand to an extent why films such as these receive less and less support from studios as time went on, especially with the non-horror films not making a fortune at the box office, I am of the opinion that this subgenre has a lot more to offer cinema as a whole, and I would be interested to see films of this nature making some sort of return, at least in some capacity. I do want to highlight that although this is just my opinion on a seemingly dormant subgenre that I would be interested in seeing revived at some point, I do also acknowledge that the movie industry may just have moved on from this type of film. And if the films we're left with are The Blair Witch Project, Wreck, the Paranormal Activity series, Cloverfield, Project Almanac, Chronicle, and Project X as some of the main examples, then as far as film subgenres go, that ain't half bad. So that's my first movie study video. If you're new to the channel, first of all I want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. While this video has been slightly different to my normal movie content, I would appreciate so much if you consider subscribing to the channel, as there's already a large amount of movie related content on there, with so much more to come. On the channel are two other already ongoing series of videos in a more casual chatting manner, which are Initial Thoughts, which are my instant reaction to films shortly after their release, whether they be fantastic, absolutely awful, or somewhere in the middle, and 5 of the best, a series celebrating different years in film, discussing in length my favourite movies of that chosen year. Again, I would appreciate you so much if you consider subscribing to the MrStranStran channel. If so, I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye guys. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Before you go, here are some of my other videos. For updates and information on upcoming videos, the best place to find us is my Twitter. Much love everyone.